Today's guest on the podcast is a really interesting guy from Montreal in Canada. He's called Brenden Kumarasamy, and hails originally from Sri Lanka, but is born and bred in Montreal in Canada. And he has set up a business called MasterTalk, which kind of does what it says in the tin and helps people to really master communication and to become within the top 1% of communicators in the world. It's a really interesting interview. He gives a lot of tips as to how to be a really good professional speaker, whether that is in a keynote to an audience or a presentation in the boardroom or a presentation to your team. It doesn't really make any difference, or whether it's to the parent-teacher association. But really, he gives very, very good tips. And we talk about the whole concept of how you can practice to get better at it. And he's got some really good tips as to what you can do to get better and to feel more confident about what you're doing when you get into that environment, where you've got to get up on your 2 feet and deliver a message in a really, really clear and concise way. Because, when you think about, in the corporate world, being able to communicate effectively, with great precision and, be concise and to be with impact is so, so important. So I really encourage you to listen to Brenden. He's very interesting, very lively, very energetic, as you can well imagine, and a very interesting guy to listen to. And there were one or two things that we did that I thought were fun during the interview. So if you like the interview, what would help us get to a wider audience, if you can give us a review, and then we will reach a wider audience. But in the meantime, sit back and enjoy the very, very interesting Brenden Kumarasamy. Brenden, thank you so much indeed for joining us here on the podcast. It's a great honor to have you all the way from Montreal in Canada.
The honor is absolutely mine, John. Thanks for having me.
Really looking forward to it. Before we get into, maybe just give a little bit of background to listeners about, where you've come from and also MasterTalk, how it came about and what it does.
Absolutely, John. So the history is, when I was in university, I used to do these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So other guys my age were playing rugby or basketball or baseball, something else that was really too dangerous for me to play, frankly. I took my competitive spirit and applied it to presentations. So believe it or not, for 3.5 years, I presented hundreds of times presentations in a competitive setting. And what happened is, while I was coaching these students on how to speak, because we didn't really have a communication coach, a lot of those students kept asking me a question that I didn't really have an answer to. And the question was, how did you learn how to speak? And I said, well, I don't really know how I learned how to speak. I just did it a bunch of times. And that's what ended up leading to what I ended up doing a few years later, MasterTalk, which is a coaching business where I help ambitious executives and entrepreneurs become top 1% communicators in their industry. But more so than that as well, the YouTube channel MasterTalk was created to make every single human being in the world exceptional communicators. Imagine how the world would change if we were all amazing at this art. So that's the mission.
So just in terms of, just kind of go back when you're saying that you actually had doing competitive presentations. What are competitive presentations? What is that?
I know it's a very hard concept to understand, but I'll try my best to explain this. So essentially what happens, what country are you from? I forgot to ask you.
I'm from Ireland, yeah, but living in,
you're in
France, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so I know it'll be really hard for you to believe, but the University of Cork in Ireland is actually, Cork, right? Did I get that correctly?
Yes, absolutely.
Is one of the biggest case competition schools in the world. So literally this is what happened.
Wow.
So business students from different universities like Cork literally take a flight from Ireland to Montreal. Their school friends all the money just for those students to give PowerPoint presentations for a week.
Wow.
I know, it's absolutely crazy. So why do people do this? Why does this exist? The reason this exists is because executives of companies, think Walmart, Nike, any company, insert company name here, what they do is they spend tens of thousands of dollars sponsoring these competitions and judge these competitions to give job offers to the brightest people, because only somebody really committed would do case competitions. I mean, this is not something everyone goes, oh yeah, I totally want to do presentations for fun. So that's the main reason why these competitions exist, and why I first entered the games myself, because I wanted a top corporate job at a university. I saw education as the way out, and that's what many people across the world, like the University of Cork and many other universities do.
And as a matter of interest, I mean, did you find that as a gateway to get the corporate career started?
Oh yeah, every single one of my friends received multiple job offers before they even graduated from university, because all of the executives would watch them speak. And keep in mind, these individuals were not 30 years old, right? When I was competing, the people that were presenting at a high level in front of senior vice presidents of companies and CEOs were 20, 21 years old.
Right.
So these executives would look at these students and go, wow, they're better presenters than I am. So I'll give an example because I love the curiosity. So an average case team would come up. Cork was one of the best, I would say top 10. But let's say you jump in, presentation would sound something like this. Hi, John, and to the team, my name's Brenden. These are my clients. That's normal. They're like 20. But then you have these absolutely crazy, right, competitive teams that would sound something more like this. When I was a kid, I absolutely loved Walmart, going into the store, seeing the different aisles and items. And that's why we're extremely excited to present the future of Walmart. Good afternoon to the board of directors of Walmart. So it's super professional. And the executives go, I need to hire this person. So that's what happened.
That's fascinating. I mean, and I can very readily see, I mean, having come from a corporate background, I can very readily see, because the ability to communicate is such a foundational skill to have. I'm interested, Brenden, that you say that your promise to your clients is to make them in the top 1% communicator. What determines the 1%, that 1%, and what separates them from the rest?
I love that question. So the way that I define, of course, it's entirely subjective. There's no science behind this. I always like to give that disclaimer. Is the way I think about this with my clients is, what are the steps in the actions that we're willing to take that everyone else in your industry isn't willing to do? So here's a couple of examples. Let's start from easy, and then I'll make it just a little bit harder, but not go too crazy to confuse the audience. So something easy that I teach is called the random word exercise. So the random word exercise, which I'm happy to demonstrate if you'd like, John, is simply somebody gives you a random word and you present something out of thin air. So the reason why this is such an effective exercise, but also why most people aren't willing to do it, is because if you get avocado, you just go, well, I don't want to present this. But what happens is, when you get used to that exercise and you go back into the boardroom, well, it's not like the boardroom is going to ask you, hey, John, can you talk about avocados for 2 minutes? Like, that never happens. They ask you about your subject matter expertise.
Okay, well, can we play with that just for a second? And can I just throw a random word at you and just go, okay, circus.
Circus, there you go. So here I go. I was not given this word before, so now I have to.
No, not at all. I hadn't even had this question in my mind.
Right. So here's what it looks like. In life, play is everything. Most human beings, John, we focus so much on getting the work done, going about our 9 to 5, and finishing our day with hopefully a little bit of rest. But what if we made life fun? And there's so many ways to make life fun. For some of us, it's going for a walk. For others, it's going to the gym. But for some, it's attending a circus. You might wonder why. Circuses are a lot more than how it's portrayed in the media. It's not just a group of people who come together and do some random performance and leave, but it's an experience. It's a craft. It's a magical idea where you sit down and pretend that the world, all of your problems, just disappear, and you focus on the show. And that's the magic of the circus.
Brenden, that's really good. That's really impressive. Well done for you, because I did kind of throw that at you right in the middle. But let's go back. We were talking about communicator. What separates the 1% from the rest?
Right. So there's a bunch of things, but I'll give you kind of the top 3.
Right.
So I would say, besides the random word exercise, there's more of an easier thing. It's not in the top 3. I would say the number 1 thing is communication goal setting. So think about this as you're listening to this podcast. Do you have goals? And most people would answer yes. So then I would ask again, what type of goals do you have? They might say financial goals, career goals, lifestyle goals, but how many of us have communication goals? And even the people who do, John, it's generally vague. I want to start a podcast. I want to speak on a stage. It's not very specific. So what we do, and I'm happy to tell you what that is so people can implement, what we do in our programs is we force you to pick 3 speakers that you admire. Tony Robbins, is it an executive that you admire? Is it a thought leader, a comedian? And then you analyze them at a very deep level. What are their strengths? What are the weaknesses? And then you have clear direction on where you need to be focusing your communication skills. And because if you don't have a target, how are you supposed to hit it? That's the first one.
Okay. And for many people, I mean, and going back to what I was saying there a few minutes ago, I mean, the ability to stand up and communicate and present is a really, really critical skill to have in not just in the corporate world, but generally speaking. But so many people struggle. I mean, they say it's the thing that they fear probably more than almost anything else in the world, is to actually get up in front of people. But if people want to get better at it, where do they start? I mean, if I want to improve, okay, if I'm at this level and I want to get to a really high level, okay, so to improve my speaking, to improve my communication, what are the things that I should be doing and what should I be working on in order to get better?
Absolutely. So doing the random word exercise 5 times a day is a fun way to practice a daily alone. That's an easy thing people could do. Excuse me. The second easiest thing that people can do, John, is what I call the puzzle framework. So as you're building a presentation, most of us just put a bunch of slides together. But the way I think about it is public speaking is like a jigsaw puzzle. So let's say I throw it back to you, John. And the question is, it's not a trick question. Let's say you're working on a jigsaw puzzle yourself with your family, the people around you. Which pieces would you start with first and why?
Well, I'd probably try and start with the outside pieces and work in so that I get the kind of the bigger picture.
Absolutely. Right. So you do the corners and then you work your way into the middle. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. Right. That's what most of us do. But here's the thing, John. In public speaking, we tend to do the opposite. We start with the middle pieces first. So we shove all this content in our presentations. We go give the presentation. We ramble through the whole thing. And then the last slide sounds something like this. Yeah, so thanks. So how do we fix that? Practice your communication, your speeches like a jigsaw puzzle. Start with the edges first. So practice your introduction 50 times, not 2 or 3 times. Do it 50 times. 50 seems like a big number, John, but it really isn't, because your introduction is like a minute or 2. Same thing with the conclusion. What's a great movie with a terrible ending? Last time I checked, terrible movie, right? So 50 times the close, and you'll realize that after 2 hours of practicing your introduction and your conclusion, you'll say, wow, this is the best introduction and conclusion I've ever given in my life. And then use that momentum and then figure out the middle.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because so many people that you see, they actually start working on their slides before they're actually working on what they're going to say, which I always think is the wrong way around. But it was interesting what you're saying about to prepare, because I remember as a 12, 13-year-old in school, and God knows that was a long time ago.
Like 10 years ago.
One of the, yeah. And, but the teacher that we had in debating, his line, I've never forgotten it. His thing was learn the first 3 sentences off by heart. And the explanation as to why you do that, he said, it's a bit like takeoff of a plane. Once you're airborne, it's easy, right? But if you stutter in trying to take off, it makes life very, very difficult. And I've always stuck to that in any opportunity I've had to public speaking, that I would do that, because, and it's those sorts of things that really, really help. And I love what you're saying about to practice and practice and practice, because that's actually at the core of it. One of the things that I mean, and you touched on it there, and kind of think of people that you admire. You mentioned like so Tony Robbins or various other people. Do you embrace, or do you think, Brenden, that embracing that kind of concept of an alter ego for yourself for speaking is that something that you would recommend? And let me explain what I mean by that. One of the public speakers, I mean, you're talking about who do you admire? One of the public speakers that I would admire hugely is Barack Obama. Right? I think he's a great public speaker. One of the things I love about him is his use of pausing and silence. I think it's really powerful. And if I'm delivering a keynote, I would try and kind of embrace that kind of, I'm not imitating Barack Obama because that wouldn't be a very clever thing to do, but I'm just trying to embrace what I see and what he does. And that, is that something that you would recommend for people to do?
I definitely think you're on the right track there, John. So what I would say, just to add more layer to what you're saying, is the analogy I always like to give is public speaking is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. So one of those balls is filler words. Another one is, hey, keep your eyes on the camera as you're speaking to John. The other one is, hey, make sure that your vocal tone isn't too monotone the entire presentation, the entire podcast episode. So you're always doing these things. What your goal is as a speaker, especially as you're getting started, is you juggle one of those balls at a time. Okay, I get the filler words right. I get the pausing right. And I feel that by focusing on people like Barack Obama, I think that's a great way for us to start looking at somebody we personally admire, because for all of us, it's different. But instead of imitating, we could say something like, what's one thing in Barack's game that I can bring back into mine, which in your case, which you did perfectly, which is, hey, let me try pausing a bit more, but then keep rolling. So then you go, okay, what about another speaker? What's one thing I want to take from them? And then just keep doing that. And eventually you'll be a master speaker.
Yeah, I think it's great. Why do you think, I mean, see, people are so terrified of getting up, on their feet to talk, whereas, in a good environment, in a social environment, they have no trouble. Why is it that we struggle so much when we get up on our feet?
Excellent question. So many experts are asked this question. I feel my answer is not scientific, but it's more anecdotal that I think will land the plane for all of us, which is the following. Let's think about it. Where do we give most of our presentations in our life? School and then work. Simple. So there's 3 key issues with all those presentations. Number one, 100% of all of them are mandatory. It's never, oh, John, what are you passionate about? Do you like podcasting? Would you like to do a presentation on podcasting? That's not what this is. It's, hey, John, Brenda, I need you to do a presentation on the Renaissance. And you're just like, Ooh. So all the presentations are mandatory. We don't wake up one morning and say, hey, John, want to get breakfast and present all day? Doesn't make sense. Number 2, none of those presentations are ever the same. So if you want to learn a new instrument, or you want to learn how to be an exceptional podcast host like yourself, same action repeated over time. So when you did your first podcast, probably weren't amazing. Like me, in my first YouTube channel, I definitely wasn't amazing. But then when you're at your 100th or 50th or 75 or 200, you get really good. But the challenge with communication is your presentation always changes. You got history class, then you got math class, and then you're at work, and then every scenario changes. And finally, number 3, every presentation you've given in your life, John, is tied to a punishment. It's never, hey, John, can you present this thing? We're really excited. Hey, can we clap for John? No. It's, hey, by the way, John, if you don't do a great job, you're going to get an F in the report card. And when you go to work, if you don't do a great job in corporate, we're not going to fire you or anything, but that promotion you wanted, it's probably not the right fit for you. So how are we supposed to get great at communication in that environment?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Let's talk about the current world that we're all in, where we're spending so much time instead of being face to face with people, not necessarily even with the audience. I know that's beginning to trickle back, but we're all working in the world of Zoom or WebEx or Teams or whatever version that we have. When you're presenting in that medium, Brenden, what are you doing? What do you need to do in order to have the impact that you want to have?
Definitely. It's not easy, right? Let's start there.
No.
But there's a couple of tips that I can give to help people elevate their game. Because one of the benefits of COVID and the online world, is if you're exceptional at presenting virtually, when you go back in person, you are going to be amazing. Because a lot easier to gather that energy from people when you're right next to them. So the first tip is to always keep your eyes on the camera lens, like we're doing currently as we're having this very conversation. And the way you do this, the trick, is to put something that you really love next to the camera lens. Could be a family member, could be a favorite food, or you could have a fun one I like to recommend to clients, which is look here or else. That's a fun one that I like. That's the number one tip. Number two is get on a phone call with somebody that you know who's going to be in the audience. So that way you can really understand them, feel their energy a lot more, and know that they're in the audience and you're presenting to them so you can show up with your full energy. And the third one, which we can start doing now, is if you're delivering a keynote or workshop that you do on a consistent basis and it's always the same, I also recommend presenting your presentation offline first before online. So what that means is you would go out there and present it offline, like in the real world, and then you know the energy that it takes to deliver that, and you copy that energy when you're virtual.
Oh, that's a really good idea. And in terms of, being the recipient, because one of the things that I've heard people talk about is that, I said, when I'm delivering something on, WebEx or Zoom or Teams, whatever it might be, I've really no idea if people are paying attention, right? What are the things as the observer and the participant and the receiver of the communication, how can we help the presenter to actually demonstrate that we are engaged?
Absolutely. So keeping the camera on for sure is good etiquette. Using body language, oh, that was really good, even if you're muted, or talking in a chat. But what you also touched upon, John, which is really important, is what do you do as the speaker if no one's engaging? If no one's there, if you feel like you're not getting the energy that you need. And it's happened to me a couple of times when I do speaking engagements during the year virtually. So here's the punchline. The punchline is you need to assume that you're amazing. And that's not easy. That's why presenting it offline helps, because you get that feedback right away where people go, oh my God, John, what you just did there was excellent. So you're constantly reminded by that energy. So when you go back virtual, it's kind of this weird environment where you have to tell a joke. And even if nobody's laughing, you have to assume people are laughing. You have to keep moving forward without making it awkward and saying, yeah, was that funny? Or
Okay. So just so we come to everybody listening to this podcast is likely to have a presentation coming up that they need to deliver in the next could be day, could be a couple of days, in the next week or so. What are the 3 tips that you would give them to actually really nail that presentation?
Absolutely. Practice like a puzzle, right? So start with the edges first, practice the edges, work your way into the middle. Number 2 is do the harder thing. That means practicing the random word exercise on a consistent basis. This helps a lot more than you think, because I can do circus randomly. When somebody asks me questions about communication, I go, you should ask me something hard, right? Yeah. So it changes your mindset around that. So I highly recommend you think about that. And then the third piece is a question that I'd love to ask back for people to reflect on. And the question is simply, how would the world change if you were an exceptional communicator? So much of public speaking, John, is wrapped around negativity. It's around stress or anxiety or fear. But we don't talk about the positives. Communication is the most important skill you need to learn in your life. It's the way that you interact with the people that you love. It's the way that you have less fighting in the house, or you live a peaceful life. There's a lot more benefits than just presenting really well in a boardroom. So I'd love for people to just spend 5 minutes now, pausing this episode or after the episode is over. How would the world change for you if you're an exceptional communicator?
Love that. Love that. Brenden, thank you. That was great. 2 questions I ask everybody. One, a book, might be one you're reading now, or a book that has made a significant impact upon you.
Of course. The most important book I've ever read is a book called Thirst by Scott Harrison. Scott Harrison is the CEO of a nonprofit called Charity Water. He went from one of the best nightclub promoters in New York City in his early 20s to starting a nonprofit to help the world gain access to clean drinking water. He's raised hundreds of millions of dollars of capital. He's a personal hero of mine. And I think the reason why I love the book so much is because of his ability to storytell and communicate the message of Charity Water to such amazing results. And he has a great quote that I'd also love to share. And the quote is, "The goal is not to live forever, but rather create something that will." So I highly recommend the read.
Oh, I love that. That's a new one for me. And that's definitely going on my list. That sounds like a great read. The other question is daily rituals. I've no doubt that you have them, and I'd just be really curious to hear what they are and how they help you in your day-to-day world.
Right. I would say the most important tip that matters with daily ritual is there is no size one fits all. Did I even say that correctly in English?
That's
There's no size.
Absolutely. That is, and that's so true.
Absolutely. Right. Some people are saying, oh, you know what, John? You got to do like 7 cold showers and then run a marathon. And you're just like, well, I like my eggs and my bacon and just enjoy my morning routine. So everyone's different. I think the real message that matters to everyone is you want to listen to all the gurus, listen to all the experts, taste and try everything like you would at a restaurant that you're going to the first time. So you try a couple of things, but then eventually after you're at the restaurant 5, 6 times, you kind of know what you want. You just go, you know what? I'll just have the spicy one. I like that one. That's the one I enjoy. I'll have a good time. Think of it the same way with your morning routine. So I'm not a meditator. I'm not a cold shower guy. I'm not the person who works out first thing in the morning. I'm not in 5 a.m. club, but I have my own morning routine, which is more of wake up at 7:45 and always start with inspiration. So I always listen to a podcast at the beginning and I just walk and I reflect, and that's my think time. And then after I run my meetings, whether it's podcast appearances, sales calls, coaching calls, and then at the end of my day, not at the beginning, I work out because that's what works for me, or else I'm tired during the whole day if I work out like crazy in the morning. So yeah, just find the size that fits you, but try everything.
I think that's great advice, actually, because I've often heard people say, oh, well, you have to do this or you have to do that. And I always say, well, no, you don't, right? You've actually got to figure out what works for you. And also, I think it depends on the season of your life and the season that you're going through, because the things that actually can be really helpful at one stage, if you try and change it and do something else for a while and just try that one out. I think that's really great advice. Brenden, this has been great. Where can people get in touch with you? How can they find you and how can they connect with you?
Absolutely, John. So it's 2 easy ways. So the YouTube channel is definitely the best place to start. It's MasterTalk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate. And if you want to get free coaching from me directly, I host 2 free trainings every month. If you want to access that, that's rockstarcommunicator.com/workshop.
Brenden, this has been really great fun, really enlightening, and I'm delighted that you agreed to come along today. Thank you so much indeed. I wish you success. I look forward to catching up again soon.
Honor was absolutely mine, John.
Thank you.